Ho steps out. He adjusts the sleeve of his dark coat. His expression is calm, but inside, he's tense. Today is an important day. He has a meeting in an hour. Not a business meeting in the usual sense, but a conversation that will resolve a difficult issue. He needs to convince someone to make the right choice. Min-ho has already thought through all the arguments, but in his mind, he replays the conversation over and over again. He doesn't like surprises. His phone vibrates quietly in his pocket. It's a message from Jin, his assistant. Jin is already inside, having checked the meeting place, and reported that everything is fine. Min-ho briefly replies, "Okay," and puts the phone back. He looks at the entrance to the shopping center. People are coming and going, laughing, carrying purchases. He rarely visits such places without a reason. Usually, his route takes him to specific offices or restaurants. But today, the meeting is here. He walks through the automatic doors. It's warm and noisy inside. Soft music is playing somewhere, and children's laughter and voices can be heard. He moves quickly and purposefully, his gaze fixed ahead. He notices people out of the corner of his eye, but he doesn't truly see them. They're just part of the background, obstacles in the way. His thoughts drift back to the upcoming conversation. He needs to be firm, but not rude. Show strength, but also make it clear there's a way out. He passes a cafe, a flower kiosk, and turns toward the escalators. The meeting is scheduled for a small conference room on the 3rd floor. In the office section, having reached the 2nd floor, Min-ho walks along a wide gallery. He's almost to the stairs leading up when his path is suddenly blocked. Directly in front of a small cosmetics store, in the narrow space between the display case and the railing, stands a young woman. And not just standing. In front of her are 2 modest used strollers, parked side by side. The door to the store is narrow, and one of the strollers is slightly wider. The woman tries to carefully push one in first, but the other one is outside, and she can't leave it unattended. She rolls the stroller back and looks back and forth between the door and the children, sighing. Min-ho freezes for a moment. He should just go around, but the space is tight. To get past, he must either ask her to move or carefully squeeze between the stroller and the railing. He chooses the latter. He takes a step, turns sideways, and begins to move forward. At that moment, the woman, Shanice, tries to roll the stroller into the store again, and her movement coincides with Min-ho's. They almost collide. He instinctively steps back, stepping on someone's shadow. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Shanice says, pushing the stroller back. She looks confused and very tired. There are light shadows under her eyes, and her hair is pulled back into a loose ponytail. She looks at Min-ho, then at the strollers, and back at the door. It's clear she desperately needs to get inside, but the task seems impossible. She bites her bottom lip, trying to decide what to do. Min-ho is ready to just leave. His time is precious. Every minute counts. He looks away, intending to bypass this mundane problem, when he suddenly notices a small pink onesie moving in one of the strollers. And from the second, a quiet, disgruntled whine comes. His gaze automatically glides over the children. 2 small faces, very similar to each other, a girl and a boy. Shanice sees the man looking at the children, not at her. It's strange. People usually look at interruptions with irritation. She takes a deep breath, gathering her courage. The thought of asking a stranger for help, especially one so serious-looking, seems crazy, but exhaustion gets the better of her. She needs milk for Amir. It'll be over soon, and tomorrow there won't be time. She clasped her fingers, rubbing them nervously. Sir?" Her voice is quiet and hesitant. Min-ho turns his head toward her. His expression is blank. He's simply waiting to see what comes next. "Sorry to bother you," she begins, hesitating. I just need to run inside for 2 minutes to get one thing, but I can't bring both." She pauses, hesitates, and then the words come out. "Could you just stand here with them? Just for a little while. I'll be right back." She says this and immediately looks at him warily, expecting a sharp refusal or even ridicule. She's ready for him to simply snort and leave. She's already mentally scolding herself for this stupid idea, but she's very tired. Min-ho looks at the woman. He sees weariness in her every movement, in her tense shoulders, in her timid gaze. Inside, he resists. He has a schedule, a meeting, an important conversation. Jin is already waiting upstairs. Every second matters. His mind is already formulating a cool, polite refusal. "Sorry, I'm in a hurry," but his gaze involuntarily drifts to the strollers again. The girl in pink is babbling something, waving her fist. The boy, Amir, has already stopped whining and is simply staring off into space with his huge dark eyes. There is no anxiety, no irritation, no haste in them. There is simply a calm existence. And this thought that someone could simply exist here and now without thinking about debts, negotiations, or consequences stuns him for a second. His own world, so heavy and tense, fades away for a moment. He hears a quiet message from Jin on his phone, but doesn't even look at the screen. Shanice is about to apologize and retreat, deciding that silence is a refusal. She lowers her eyes and grabs the stroller handles, trying to squeeze one into the store and leave the other by the door. And at that moment, Min-ho hears her own voice. It sounds even a little distant, but perfectly clear. Okay, I'll wait. Shanice looks up at him sharply, disbelieving. Really? She blurts out, and the relief in her voice is so intense, it's almost physical. Min-ho simply nods curtly. I'll just get the formula. The quickest one. 5 minutes? No more, she says hurriedly, already heading for the door. She turns around at the threshold. Thank you so much. And she disappears into the store. Min-ho is left alone, the ambassador of the noisy shopping center gallery, with 2 strange strollers. At first, he stands like a guard, straight, motionless, his hands in his coat pockets. He glances in the direction Shanice disappeared, then at his watch. 2 minutes have passed. He decides to move the strollers closer to the wall so they don't impede the flow of people. He does so carefully, as if moving something fragile and valuable. He takes up his position next to her again. Now his gaze is involuntarily drawn to the children. The girl, Ali, has noticed him. She stops flapping her hands and looks at the unfamiliar face with a childish, bottomless curiosity. Then the corners of her lips twitch, and a genuine, toothless smile spreads across her face. Broad and selfless, Min-ho blinks. This simple gesture takes him by surprise. No one has smiled at him so simply and openly in, he doesn't even remember how many years. In his world, smiles always mean something. They conceal tension, are part of a deal, show superiority or submission. This smile doesn't want anything. It just is. He slowly squats down to be level with the stroller. Now he can see them both. Amir is staring intently at something on his fingers. The world around them, the hum of voices, the music, the footsteps, is suddenly muffled for Min-ho. He doesn't hear it. He hears only the quiet sniffles of the babies, their soft squeals. He watches Ali try to catch a toy hanging from the side rail with her foot. This is her whole world now. Something strange is happening inside him, where a calculating coldness always reigned. The tension in his shoulders, his constant companion, is slowly beginning to ease. Thoughts of the meeting, of Jean, of the difficult conversation, float away somewhere far away and lose their sharpness. There is only this quiet island, a refuge from the noise. These 2 small people, completely defenseless and trusting. Their peaceful, serene existence envelops him like a warm blanket. He simply hunkers down and watches, and he needs nothing else. Amir finally breaks away from studying his hands. He turns his head, and his gaze meets Min-ho's. The baby isn't frightened. He simply watches. Then he reaches his hand out from under the light blanket. A tiny palm with perfect miniature fingers opens toward him. Min-ho freezes. His mind, the part that always controls his every movement, whispers, "Don't. These are other people's children. This isn't yours." But the other part, the one that has thawed over these few minutes, is stronger. He doesn't just want to watch. He needs confirmation that this warmth, this peace, is real, that he's not dreaming. Slowly, very slowly, he takes his hand out of his pocket. His own fingers, accustomed to clenching into fists or holding heavy objects, suddenly seem huge and clumsy. He's afraid he'll do something wrong. He freezes mid-step. Amir patiently holds the pen open, gently wiggling his fingers. And Min-ho gives in. He gently touches the small palm with the tip of his index finger. The baby's skin is incredibly soft and warm. At that very moment, Amir's fingers reflexively tighten, clasping his finger. The grip is weak, barely perceptible, but for Min-ho, it feels like a powerful, silent blow. It doesn't hurt. It's a blow of pure, undiluted trust. He doesn't breathe. He looks at his large hand, and the tiny one holding it. A strange shiver runs down his spine. It's not fear. It's something long forgotten, something from such a distant past that it feels like someone else's memory. Tenderness, simple human tenderness. He remains squatting, letting the baby hold his finger, while Ali continues to smile at him from her stroller. He has forgotten about time. He has forgotten about the mall. He has forgotten about everything. Amir's finger still holds him tightly, like a child's. Min-ho doesn't move. He's afraid to frighten this moment away. The phone in his pocket vibrates again, insistently, reminding him of its presence. It's Jin. Jin is waiting on the 3rd floor, nervously checking the time. Min-ho hears the vibration through the fabric, but his hand doesn't move to answer. The thought of this meeting, of the person he needs to convince, seems incredibly distant now, almost unreal, like a dream that quickly evaporates upon awakening. His head is silent. No plans, no calculations, no risk assessments. There is only the warmth of a child's palm and the toothless smile of a little girl. He watches as Allie tries to reach for his free hand, resting on the edge of the stroller. He slowly turns his palm upward, and she immediately places her tiny hand on his thumb. 2 children. 2 points of absolute pure contact. He's completely forgotten where he is. The noise of the shopping center has faded into a distant hum, a white noise that only emphasizes the silence of this small island. He can't remember the last time he felt so calm. The word seems foreign to his vocabulary, but there's no other. He simply exists here, crouched, listening to their even breathing. How much time has passed? 2 minutes? 10? He doesn't know. And this, too, is new to him. His time has always been broken down into segments, scheduled minute by minute. Now it flows smoothly and aimlessly, and this doesn't make him panic. On the contrary, Shanice emerges from the store, carrying a small bag of formula. Her face still shows signs of fatigue, but also a hint of haste. She's afraid she's been delayed. Her eyes immediately find the strollers against the wall, and the man. She freezes for a second. The scene she sees is not what she expected. She expected him to be standing there, bored, or checking his watch. Instead, he's crouched, leaning over the strollers. His posture, the same one that had seemed so rigid and unapproachable, is now relaxed. He's not just supervising, he's watching. He's watching her children with such intense, profound tenderness that it takes her breath away for a moment. Ali and Amir are calm. In fact, they look peaceful. Amir even holds his finger, and the man allows him to do so. Shanice slowly approaches. The scrape of her shoes on the floor makes Min-ho look up. He meets her gaze, and there's none of her usual distance or polite coldness in his eyes. They're different, softer, a little confused, as if he'd just been awakened. "Here I am," Shanice says quietly, somehow embarrassed. "Is everything okay?" Min-ho nods slowly. He carefully, so as not to disturb Amir, frees his finger. The baby chuckles but doesn't cry. Min-ho stands up. His knees are slightly numb, but he doesn't notice. "It's okay," he says, his voice a little muffled. They're very calm. Shanice looks at the children, then back at him. A wave of sincere, fervent gratitude washes over her. This wasn't just help. He'd given her these few minutes of silence and even cared for her little ones. Not as objects, but as people. "I don't know how to thank you," she says, her voice shaking with emotion. "You've really helped me a lot, more than you know." "Thank you." She smiles at him, and this smile is no longer tired, but warm and alive. Min-ho looks at that smile. He sees gratitude in her eyes. And again, just like a few minutes ago, he hears his words before he fully understands their meaning. They come out of him on their own, driven by that strange, warm feeling of emptiness and peace that the children left within him. He doesn't want this moment to end. He doesn't want to go back to the 3rd floor, to his ordinary life. Here, with these 3 people, he feels good. Do you need to go somewhere else?" he asks unexpectedly. Shanice blinks, confused. "Excuse me?" "At the mall," he clarifies, his speech, usually so precise, now a little halting. "Perhaps you need to buy something? Or just rest? You look tired." Shanice smiles nervously, shrugging. "Rest? With 2 little ones? That's out of the question." "Yeah, I need a few other things, but..." She nods at the strollers. "They're complicated." Min-ho takes a step forward. His decision crystallizes in an instant, becoming absolutely clear. "I'll sit with them," he says firmly, "while you do what needs to be done, or just sit somewhere quiet. Have some coffee." Shanice's eyes widen. She looks at him, trying to find any hint of humor, or worse, some hidden agenda in his expression, but all she sees is a strange, genuine seriousness. You're suggesting..." She can't even finish. It sounds insane. A stranger she met 10 minutes ago is offering to babysit her children while she goes shopping? Ho says simply, "You have things to do. I just now have some time." He almost said freed up, but stopped himself in time. The meeting hadn't gone anywhere. It just hadn't mattered anymore. Shanice looks at Min-ho, and a storm of emotions flashes in her eyes. First, pure incomprehension, then a piercing, almost painful hope. Imagine, a whole hour without having to push 2 strollers, without the constant, "Mom, Mom," without having to count every penny in the store, just being alone, drinking hot coffee that won't have time to cool, walking into the fitting room without rushing. It sounded like a fairy tale, but then, like a cold wave, fear washes over her. A rational, maternal, instinctive fear. She's seen him for 5 minutes. He's polite. He looks wealthy. But who is he really? What if he's crazy? What if he kidnaps the children? What if he just takes them away while she's choosing coffee? and she never sees them again? All the scary news headlines she tries not to think about flash through her mind. Her face betrays this internal struggle. She clutches the bag of formula so tightly that her fingers turn white. I can't, she finally breathes out, her voice dripping with disappointment. That's very generous of you, but they're my children. I can't just leave them with a stranger. You understand that, right? She expects him to frown, become angry at her distrust, turn around and leave. But Min-ho only nods slowly. He doesn't look offended. He looks as if he's considering a new, complex yet interesting problem, a problem that needs to be solved. You're right, he says calmly. Absolutely right. This can't be done. Shanice feels a strange disappointment. It's all over then. But he doesn't leave. Min-H thinks for a second. His gaze becomes focused, the way it does when he's trying to find a way out of a difficult situation. He glances at the strollers, then at his phone. You need guarantees, he states. Logical guarantees. He suddenly takes a small leather wallet from his coat's inside pocket. He opens it and, without hesitation, takes out his passport. He hands the document to Shanice. Here, he says simply, is my ID, with my photo and my details. Now you know who I am. Shanice instinctively takes the passport. It's heavy, the cover thick. She looks at the photo. He's a little younger, but the same. The name is Stern. Unfamiliar. She flips through the pages. Everything looks real. It's disconcerting. Who gives their passport to a stranger in a shopping mall? But that's not enough, Min-ho continues, as if reading her thoughts. He takes out his phone and quickly types out a message. I can't leave you my physical self as collateral, but I can leave you control. He pockets his phone again and looks at the strollers with a businesslike air. You need to see where they are. All the time. He glances around, his gaze falling on a small electronics store at the end of the gallery. Wait here for a minute. Just a minute. He walks away quickly, leaving Shani standing with her passport in one hand and the bag of formula in the other, completely bewildered. She looks at the sleeping Amir and the playing Ali. They are completely safe. They are here. And this strange man is running somewhere. He returns less than 5 minutes later, holding a small plastic bag. From it, he takes out 3 small, flat devices that look like keychains or miniature flashlights. Beacons, he explains briefly. Real-time tracking. He turns on one device, and a tiny green LED lights up. He carefully clips it to the inner mesh of Ali's stroller, so it's almost invisible. The second one to Amir's stroller. He clips the third one to his belt, under the waistband of his coat. Then he takes another box out of the bag. A simple, inexpensive smartphone in plastic packaging. He quickly opens it, turns on the phone, and installs a simple app. His fingers fly across the screen with their usual speed. Here, he hands her the phone. The app screen displays a schematic map of the mall floor. 3 bright dots are blinking on it. Blue, green, and red. Blue is me. Green is this stroller. He nods at Ali. Red is this one. You'll see where we are. Every second. If any dot moves outside this building or moves away from the others, you'll know instantly. Shanice looks at the screen, then at him. Her defenses are cracking. This isn't just some strange act of goodwill anymore. It's a well-thought-out system. He doesn't just ask for trust, he provides it. Technically and documentarily. You have my passport. You have real-time surveillance, Min-ho says, his voice thick with the final decisive argument. I'll stay here on this bench with them. I'm not going anywhere. Only if I go to that store, he points to the children's department across the aisle, to buy them a few things they need. You'll see. Your hour. Or 2. Go. Shanice takes a last, deep breath. She looks at his face, at the calm children, at the blinking dots on the screen of the phone in her hand, at the passport in her other hand. The fear recedes. Not completely, no. It's faded somewhere in the background, turning into a soft background ringing, but it's drowned out by the overwhelming, almost dizzying possibility, the possibility of simply being Shanice and not the mother of twins. She nods slowly. Okay, she whispers, then louder. Okay, for an hour. I'll probably go to the salon. Just get the ends trimmed. And have some coffee, Ho says, and for the first time in the entire conversation, something vaguely resembling a smile appears on his lips. Very restrained, but genuine. Go! Shanice looks at the children for another second, adjusts Amir's blanket, and kisses Ali on the top of his head. Then she turns and walks away. Her first steps are difficult. She turns around every 5 meters, checking her phone screen. 3 dots clustered together in one spot. He's sitting on a bench. She reaches the escalator, The dots are still there. She goes up to the next floor where the salon is. She looks at the screen. Everything is there. She pauses at the entrance to the beauty salon. The interior smells of hair dye and spray. Soft music plays. She hasn't been in a place like this in over a year. She clutches her new phone, feeling the cool plastic against her fingertips. She takes one last decisive step inside. She is greeted by a smiling administrator. "Good afternoon. Are you here to see the master?" "Yes," Shanice says, her voice sounding a little strange. "Do you have a window? At least long enough to wash your hair and trim the ends?" As she's led to a chair, she takes one last look at the screen. 3 dots, blue, green, red, all together. They're there. They're safe. And then she finally lets go, releases the tension in her shoulders. She sets her phone down on the table next to her, but still able to see the screen. She leans back in the soft chair, and as the warm water touches her scalp, she closes her eyes. For the first time in months, she simply breathes. Minho sits on a bench. The strollers are parked in front of him. He doesn't check his phone, doesn't glance around with his usual vigilance. His world is narrowed to this small space. Ali has fallen asleep again, her pink blanket rising and falling slightly with her breathing. Amir is awake, but not fussy. He simply lies there, examining the pattern on the stroller's inner hood. Minho watches. He notices the smallest details, the way the girl's eyelashes flutter in her sleep, the way the boy tries to catch a beam of light falling from the ceiling. He listens to their quiet sounds, sniffles, grunts, soft gurgles. Silence reigns within him. The same silence he'd tried unsuccessfully to find in expensive spa hotels or in his soundproof office. It came to him, gifted by 2 random babies. He doesn't analyze why it's happening. He simply accepts it. It's like a sip of clean water after a long thirst he'd forgotten he even had. His hand rests on the handle of Amir's stroller. His thumb lightly traces the plastic. This simple, rhythmic movement calms both him and, it seems, the baby. He doesn't think about the fact that Jin is probably already going crazy with worry on the 3rd floor. He mentally sent him a short transfer, wait, and disconnected. Right now, the most important thing is this bench, this warm little bundle in pink, and this one in blue. He feels an incredible, almost physical peace. His muscles are relaxed. His breathing is deep and even. He simply exists here and now. And this is more than he could have wished for all day. About 20 minutes passed. Amir began to show a little restlessness. He grunted and shook his head. Minho leaned over him. "What's wrong? Bored?" he asked quietly, as if the child might answer. He remembered the promise he'd made to Shanice. He'd said he could stop by the children's store. He glanced at the counter across the aisle. It was bright, with lots of stuffed animals hanging on the stands. "Wait here," he whispered to Amir, as if he were an adult. "I'll be quick." He stood up, made sure the strollers were stable and out of anyone's way, and quickly headed into the store. Inside, there was a fresh, baby-like scent. He felt a slight twinge of unease. He'd never bought anything for children before. He didn't know what he needed. The saleswoman, a young woman, wanted to approach him, but he gestured to let her know he was the one doing it. His gaze fell on a display of small stuffed animals. Stuffed animals. He selected 2. One was a white rabbit with long velvet ears. The other was a brown teddy bear wearing a funny hat. They were small enough to fit in a child's hand. He took them and practically ran to the checkout, impatient as a boy. Having paid, he returned to the bench. Amir was already beginning to frown, ready to cry. Minho sat down, unwrapped the toys, and carefully placed the rabbit next to Ali and the teddy bear in Amir's stroller. The baby stopped whining. His eyes, brimming with tears, widened at the sight of the new object. He stared at the teddy bear. Minho took the toy and lightly touched the baby's cheek with it. Amir wrinkled his nose, then reached out to the bear. His fingers grasped the soft paw. At that moment, Ali woke up. She stretched, yawned, and her gaze fell on the white rabbit. She didn't smile right away, but began studying it carefully, with a serious expression. Then she reached out to it too. Minho watched as each child cuddled their little gift. A strange, unfamiliar expression appeared on his face, something like quiet pride. He'd bought them something, and they liked it. It was incredibly simple and incredibly important. At that moment, the new phone he'd bought for Shanice rang. It was lying on the bench next to him. An unfamiliar number lit up the screen. It was the number for a salon. Minho picked it up. "Hello?" he said quietly so as not to scare the children. It's me, Shanice?" Her voice came over the phone, a little guilty and tense. Is everything okay there?" She called from the administrator's phone. She was afraid to let her new one, with the tracking app, go far away, even while washing her hair. "Everything's fine," Minho replied immediately, his voice softening and soothing. "Ali's awake, Amir's awake. Everything's calm." He heard her breathe a sigh of relief on the other end of the line. Okay, just checking. Take your time. Minho said, looking at the children and their toys. They have important things to do right now. They're exploring their new friends. What friends? Shawnee said, a hint of alarm in her voice. A rabbit and a teddy bear, little ones. They seem to like them. There was a short pause. Did you buy them toys? Yes, just little ones, so they don't get bored. Shawnee's paused again. Her voice, when she spoke again, was different, warmer, more relaxed. Thank you. That's very sweet. I'll be right back. I'm already being cleaned. Okay, take your time, Minho repeated. Everything is under control. He hung up. On his phone screen, he saw that the 3 dots were still together. The blue one, him, and the 2 colored ones, the strollers. He put the phone in his pocket and looked at the children again. Amir was already trying to put his paw in the teddy bear's mouth. Ali was pressing the rabbit to her cheek. The world on the bench was perfectly normal. Minho put down his phone. The peace and quiet of the bench enveloped him again. But now a new thought was forming in his head. He looked at Ali and Amir in their modest, unmarked overalls. Toys were nice, but they were small, momentary. He felt something more, a desire to care, to provide, to fill the voids he had without realizing it. Seen in them, his gaze fell on the baby section again. The displays were filled with bright, beautiful clothes. The shelves were overflowing with boxes of diapers, jars of formula, and all sorts of useful little things. Shanice had said she needed one more thing. Something important, probably. And since he was here and had the time, why not do it for her? And not just buy one thing, but everything she might need. He didn't know exactly what he needed, but the store was big. He could figure it out. The decision came instantly. He stood up carefully, adjusted the strollers so they were securely fastened together, and slowly, like a large ship towing 2 small boats, headed toward the store. Amir, captivated by the bear cub, didn't even notice they were moving. Ali, however, looked around with interest, clutching the rabbit's ear in her hand. The door to the children's world opened with a soft ring. Inside, it was even brighter and more spacious. A quiet, cheerful melody played. 2 young saleswomen sat behind the counter near the entrance. They were chatting, but fell silent when they saw the man entering. Their gaze slid over Minho, his expensive yet formal coat, his focused, mature expression. Then they dropped to the 2 modest strollers he was pushing in front of him. The combination was so unexpected that the girls froze for a second. This wasn't a young dad in a sweatshirt and sneakers, nor a grandmother. This was a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a limousine at the entrance to a business center, not pushing a double stroller through a baby shirt store. Minho ignored their glances. He stopped in the middle of the room, looking around. His usual confidence in negotiating wasn't helping him here. He felt a little lost. Where to start? He approached the first rack. It was filled with tiny onesies and rompers. He picked up one. It was soft, with a duck print. The tag said size 68. What size did they carry? He didn't know. He turned and rolled the strollers closer. Carefully, almost with scientific interest, he placed the bodysuit against the sleeping Ali, trying to visually determine if it would fit. It looked tiny. He picked up another one, a size 74. It seemed larger. He placed both bodysuits in the basket he'd picked up at the entrance. The saleswomen whispered among themselves, watching him. They saw this serious man studying the tags on clothes with incredible concentration, eyeing the children, carefully touching the fabric, testing its softness. He didn't look flustered. He looked like a man on a mission of great responsibility. Only this mission was about choosing socks with elastic that wouldn't pinch. One of the saleswomen, a more daring one, finally approached. Can I help you, sir? Perhaps I can tell you the size? Minho looked at her. They're about 6 months old, he said, nodding toward the children. What size? The girl smiled. About 74. What's your height and weight? Minho thought for a moment. Height and weight? He didn't know. He just knew they were Ali and Amir. I don't know, he admitted honestly. Let's say 74 and 80, to give him room to grow. And he continued his walk through the store. Now the saleswoman was with him, offering various items. Warm fleece overalls, thin lounge suits, several hats of varying thicknesses. Minho nodded, taking the items he liked. Always 2 of them, pink or with flowers, and blue or with cars. He methodically filled his shopping cart, as if writing a report. The basket quickly filled. He picked up a second one, and then a third. Besides clothing, other sections caught his attention. Baby food in jars. He began reading the ingredients, choosing vegetable and fruit purées, cereals. He picked up a whole box of size 4 diapers, as the saleswoman recommended. Then he went to the section with bottles, pacifiers, and teethers. He selected several that he thought were the most suitable. Then there were hooded towels, soft blankets, and beautiful crib mobiles. He didn't have a crib, but they looked useful. He collected everything that seemed useful, high quality, and beautiful. When he finally reached the checkout, a whole caravan of goods trailed behind him, 3 overflowing shopping baskets and 2 strollers. The cashier and saleswomen could barely conceal their surprise. They began scanning the items. The pile at the checkout grew. Onesies, rompers, onesies, suits, socks, hats, blankets, diapers, food, accessories, and a few larger stuffed animals. Minho watched this calmly, glancing at the children from time to time. He paid with his card, not looking at the final amount. It didn't matter. There were a lot of bags. Huge, dense. Minho weighed them in his hands. He couldn't carry them all and push the strollers. He looked around and saw a shopping cart at the entrance to the store. He loaded all the bags into the cart, creating an impressive mountain. He hooked the cart to his stroller with one hand and continued to push the other one with the other. Now his little caravan looked even more impressive, 2 strollers with children in front and a cart groaning with bags of baby things behind. He slowly rolled the procession back into the mall's gallery and headed toward his bench. The strollers in his arms, he still carried a couple of the smallest bags of toys, were literally piled high with purchases. He felt not fatigue, but a strange, deep satisfaction. He had done something concrete, something good. He had provided for them, even if only temporarily. This feeling was new and very pleasant. He settled down on the bench, placing the cart with his treasures nearby, and again immersed himself in watching Ali and Amir, who had no idea what wealth now surrounded them. The bag containing the new phone vibrated softly. Minho pulled it out. The beauty salon's number was back on the screen. Hello? I'm done. Shania's voice sounded different, lighter, more rested, but there was also the familiar caution. The checking. Can I come back? Minho glanced around his property, the peacefully sleeping children, the mountain of bags in the cart. For a moment, he almost felt sorry that this strange, quiet period of time was ending. Of course, he said. We're in the same place. By the bench. Okay, I'm on my way down. In about 5 minutes, she said, and hung up. Minho put his phone away. He looked at the children. Amir had finally fallen asleep, clutching his teddy bear to his cheek. Ali was dozing too, covered in one of the new cloud-soft blankets he'd pulled from the bag and carefully draped over her, over the old one. He knew Shanice would show up any minute, and everything would go back to normal, but he didn't want this moment to end. He wanted her to see not just children saved, but children cared for. Truly cared for. He acted quickly and quietly. Carefully, he unwrapped one of the clothing bags. It contained a set, a pink lace bodysuit, and a thin romper to match, and a similar set, but blue, with cheerful elephants printed on it. He'd picked them out in the store, guided by a vague notion that they're beautiful. He glanced at the children's old, slightly worn onesies. No, changing them now was awkward and inconvenient, and it wasn't necessary, but he wanted her to see the gift. He carefully laid the new ones on top of the blankets, on the children's feet, as a display. Let her see that there was something fresh, smart, bought, especially for them. He sat down and waited, his hand on the cart with the bags, as if guarding treasures. Shanice walked down the gallery, her steps lighter than they had been this morning. Her hair, neatly trimmed, lay in straight, shiny strands. There was no trace of fatigue on her face, only a slight, embarrassed glimmer. She held a new phone in her hand and kept glancing at the screen. The 3 dots were still grouped near the bench. She walked out to a small fountain, which served as their landmark, and stopped. First she saw him. Minho was sitting on the same bench, upright and calm. Then she saw the strollers. And what was nearby? Her brain refused to process the image immediately. Children. Her children. Asleep, covered in some incredibly soft, beautiful blankets. On top of these blankets were sets of new, bright, expensive-looking children's clothes. And next to the bench stood a huge cart, filled to the brim with large, thick bags. A sand shovel handle protruded from one, a box of diapers from another. Next to the cart's wheels stood 2 boxes containing some kind of electronic devices, resembling baby monitors or steam sterilizers. She slowly approached, her eyes wide. She looked from the children to the pile of groceries, then at Minho. What? What is this? She breathed, pointing at the cart. Minho stood up. Necessary things. Clothes, food, diapers, a few other things. All of this? This whole cart? Her voice rose to a high note. He nodded as if it were self-evident. Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly what I needed, so I got a few different ones, and a little bit of room for growth. Shanice walked over to the strollers. She touched the new pink bodysuit lying on Ali. The fabric was soft, expensive. She looked up at Minho. You bought my kids half the store. They should be clothed and fed, he said simply, as if he were uttering an absolute truth. And you should have less trouble. Shanice felt a hot flush spread across her cheeks. It was a mixture of shock incredible gratitude, and acute embarrassment. She had never seen such generosity in her life. No one had ever done anything like this for her or the children. It was overwhelming. I don't know what to say, she whispered, clutching the phone in her hand, Minho's passport already clutched convulsively in her other palm. It's too much. I can't take it all in. It's a fortune, Minho shrugged, as if he were talking about a couple of bottles of water. They're just things. They're necessary. Don't think about it. But how can I not think? She exclaimed, tears welling in her voice. You're a stranger. You looked after my children. You bought them. Everything. Why? He paused for a moment, his gaze sliding over the sleeping children. They've given me more today than you can imagine, he said, surprisingly sincerely. A few minutes of peace. That's something you can't buy, so consider us even. It sounded so strange and so true that Shanice paused for a moment. She looked at this reserved, serious man who spoke of peace while looking at the babies. Two feelings warred within her, a burning desire to accept this incredible help for her children and a crushing sense of obligation, a debt to a stranger. I can't just go and do nothing in response, she said quietly, looking down. It's not right. You already did, Minho countered. You entrusted them to me for an hour. That was enough. He reached out to take his passport from her. Their fingers brushed lightly. She handed it over, still unable to look at him. Consumed with embarrassment and gratitude, she felt both immensely obliged and terribly awkward. What adequate gratitude could there be for a mountain of baby clothes and a few hours of freedom? The words thank you were woefully inadequate. Shanice finally looked up at him. The children were slowly waking up. Amir, seeing his mother, smiled and extended his arms toward her. Shanice said, picking up her son. And sleep. And all this. She looked again, confused, at the cart with the bags. How was she going to get all this stuff on the bus? Minho also stood up. The idea of simply saying goodbye here, by the fountain, and leaving suddenly seemed incredibly wrong, abrupt, as if he would cut short something important that had just begun. He didn't want that. Let me drive you, he said firmly, but without pressure. By car. It will be easier with all your things. Shanice, cradling Amir in her arms, hesitated. This was another step into the unknown. Getting into a car with a stranger. And have dinner on the way, he added, as if it were a self-evident continuation. You must be hungry, and it's probably time for the children to eat too. He spoke so simply, as if solving a logistical problem, and there was nothing frightening about it. There was only practicality. Shanice looked at the sleeping Ali, at the pile of bags, at her reflection in the glass of the storefront, at the well-groomed woman she had been an hour ago. She was tired, but not so exhausted. And she really did need to feed the children. I don't want to burden you, she weakly tried to object. It's not a burden, Minho snapped. He was already pulling out his phone. I'll call a car. It'll be at the main exit in 5 minutes. Do you need anything else before you leave? She shook her head, knowing resistance was futile and, frankly, undesirable. The thought of not having to push 2 strollers and lug bags onto a crowded bus was too tempting. Then let's get ready, he said, and began carefully transferring the bags from the cart back into the large bags he was carrying. The car, dark and quiet, pulled smoothly to a stop outside a low-rise apartment building on the outskirts of town. Gene, the driver, silently got out to help unload the luggage. His face was completely impassive when he saw his boss carrying strollers and weighed down with shopping bags. Minho helped Shanice carry everything to her door on the 4th floor. The building's elevator was out of order. He wordlessly carried both strollers up the stairs while she carried Amir and the lightest bags. The apartment was small. Very small. The hallway led directly to the door of the only room. The tiny kitchen barely accommodated 2 people, but everything was clean, modest, sparse, but clean. Toys were neatly stacked in a basket next to the sofa, which apparently served as Shanice's bed. A crib stood in the corner of the room. A second folding one was apparently put away for the day. The air smelled of baby cream, formula, and clean linens. Nothing extra, just the essentials. Minho silently placed the strollers and bags in the corner of the hallway, not commenting on the cramped space. His gaze slid over the cracked wallpaper, over the old but shiny linoleum. He didn't see poverty. He saw the hard daily work of one woman. The same struggle he'd seen on her face at the mall. Shanice fidgeted, embarrassed. Sorry for the mess. Well, the cramped space. Please sit. She gestured to the sofa, which was neatly covered with a throw. Thank you, Minho said, remaining standing, not wanting to inconvenience her further. You need to make dinner for the children. I'll wait. Shanice nodded, and leaving him in the room, hurried to the kitchen. Through the open door, he could hear her heating water and preparing the mixture. The sounds were familiar, homey. He walked over to the crib. He stroked the wooden edge with his palm. Then his gaze fell on Amir, whom Shanice had placed on a blanket on the floor, while she was busy in the kitchen. The little boy watched him with interest. Min-ho squatted down next to him. "So, how do you like the new apartment?" he asked quietly. Amir rubbed his eye with his fist in response. Shanice returned with 2 bottles. "Here, I'll feed them now, and then go straight to bed." She sat on the floor, leaning against the sofa, and picked up Amir. She handed the second bottle to Min-ho, looking at him with a silent question. He understood. Slowly, carefully, he took the bottle. Shanice nodded toward Ali, who was awake in the stroller. "Can you feed her? It'll be faster." Min-ho wordlessly picked up the girl. He felt his large palms envelop her small body. He settled down next to Shanice, leaning against the sofa, and brought the pacifier to Ali's lips. She began to feed greedily, her dark eyes never leaving his. So they sat there on the floor, in the cramped room, in complete silence, except for the sounds of the children drinking formula. No one spoke. There was no need. Shanice watched furtively as this huge, serious man held her daughter with incredible care and concentration, adjusting the bottle, catching a drop of milk from her chin with his thumb. After the babies had finished eating, Shanice picked them up to burp them. Min-ho stood up and silently began putting the empty bottles away in the kitchen, rinsing them under the tap. When he returned, Shanice was already changing Amir into a fresh diaper. She handed him a clean diaper and some wet wipes. "Please hold her, and I'll hold him." And again, without further ado, they worked together. Min-ho, following her quiet, monosyllabic instructions, replaced Ali with surprising precision for a novice. His thumbs seemed clumsy with the tiny Velcro straps, but he managed. Then the children, clean and well-fed, were placed in their crib. Shanice covered them with a light blanket and turned off the overhead light, leaving only the crescent-shaped nightlight on. They went into the kitchen. Shanice poured him a glass of water and one for herself. They stood in the cramped space, listening to the children's even breathing from the room. Shanice said again, in a whisper, "For everything. You've helped me so much." Min-ho looked at the light from the room, falling into the dark hallway. He felt a strange warmth in his chest. Unfamiliar. He was here, in a strange home, and he felt not like a guest, but part of something, part of this quiet evening ritual. This feeling was far more valuable than any business success. He simply nodded in response, afraid to frighten this feeling with words. The silence in the small kitchen became thick, almost tangible. Min-ho finished his water and placed the glass in the sink. He knew it was time to go. Night had fallen. The children were asleep. His mission, unintentional, accidental, was accomplished. But his feet seemed rooted to the floor, leaving this cramped, warm space, filled with the scent of baby cream and the quiet snoring from the next room, was incredibly difficult. Harder than leaving any important meeting room. He turned to Shanice. She was leaning against the doorframe, looking at him with the same mixture of gratitude and slight confusion. "I have to go," he said, and the words sounded somehow hollow, unconvincing even to himself. Shanice simply nodded. "Of course. You already did. Well, you know." "Thank you." He took a step toward the hallway, where the shopping bags gleamed white in the darkness. He paused. His hand instinctively reached for his inside jacket pocket. He pulled out not a business card. He only had stern, laconic cards with the company name, but his personal second phone. Taking it, he dialed the number as he walked, and a second later, a thin ring from the kitchen rang in the quiet apartment, the same new phone he'd bought for surveillance. He placed his phone on the narrow table in the hallway. "This is my number," he said, looking directly at Shanice. "Private. If you need anything, formula, medicine, if you get sick, or if you're just having a hard time, call." Shanice's eyes widened. She looked from the phone to his face. It was more than a polite gesture. It was a bridge he was throwing from his world to her, and he seemed fragile and incredible at the same time. Okay, she breathed out. "Thank you." Again. He stood for another second, as if considering something, then nodded decisively and stepped out onto the landing. The door closed behind him with a soft click. He froze, listening. No sounds came from beyond the door, only the silence of a strange house, in which he had abandoned a part of his peace. Outside the door, Shanice leaned her forehead against the cool wood. Her heart was beating strangely and loudly. She heard his footsteps fade down the stairs, and the front door slam. Silence filled the apartment again, but this time it was different. She turned and looked at the bags piled high in the corner. At the phone on the table, she slowly walked over and picked it up. A simple, inexpensive device. It had one number stored in its memory, and the passport he had so easily handed over lay nearby. The next morning, life returned to its usual difficult routine. Amir woke up at 5 in the morning, Ali at 5:30. There were diapers to change, formula to prepare, crying to soothe, and porridge to make for the day. But today, something was different. She unwrapped one of the bags. She pulled out a new jar of fruit puree. Expensive, high quality, the kind she would never have bought herself. She fed it to Ali. The girl ate it all with pleasure. Then Shanice dressed the children in new, soft onesies, pink and blue. The fabric was so soft to the touch. The children looked festive in them. All day, as she went about her routine, laundry, cleaning, a walk in the old park, she caught herself thinking about the day before, about how she sat in the chair in the salon, warm water trickling down her neck, about how he sat on the bench, serious and focused, holding Amir's finger, about the silence in the kitchen when they fed the children together. These memories were like warm stones in the pocket of her weary soul. She touched them mentally and felt a little better. She was no longer just a lonely mother, trapped within four walls with two babies. For one day, her world had expanded. Someone strange, generous, and quiet had entered it, and he left behind not only a mountain of gifts, but also the feeling that someone had cared for her and the children. Truly, Ho's office was on the top floor of a glass skyscraper. Panoramic windows offered views of the entire city, the river, and the endless stream of cars below. Everything was minimalist. A massive black wood desk, a pair of designer chairs, and an abstract painting on the wall that matched the interior. The silence was broken only by the quiet hum of the air conditioner. Min-ho sat at his desk. Papers lay before him. Contracts, reports, financial statements. An important presentation was open on the monitor. Jin, sitting across from him, quietly reported on the results of yesterday's meeting, which had been canceled because of him. The man had been calmed down. The negotiations had been rescheduled, and the situation was under control. Min-ho nodded, but he didn't hear. He wasn't looking at Jin, but out the window. But he didn't see the city. He saw a tiny kitchen with cracked linoleum. He felt the warm bottle under his fingers and the weight of Ali's small body in his arms. He heard not the assistant's report, but a quiet, the snoring of two sleeping children in the next room. His own world, so well-oiled, powerful, and cold, suddenly seemed incredibly empty. Empty, like this immaculate office. It contained everything for comfort and power, but lacked that simple, dense, living warmth he had accidentally discovered yesterday. "You did everything right," he said automatically to Jin, interrupting him. "Thank you. I'll look at everything later." Jin, surprised by his boss's absent-mindedness, nodded and left, leaving him alone. Min-ho leaned back in his chair. He picked up his personal phone, the same one whose number he'd given Shanice. The screen was blank. No calls, no messages. He placed the phone back on the desk. His fingers instinctively reached for the report, but his gaze drifted out the window again. My thoughts kept swirling around the same thing. Do they have enough formula? Are they too hot in those new overalls? How is Shanice managing to carry all those bags alone? Will she have enough strength? He tried to return to the numbers, to strategies, to his usual concerns, but they seemed trivial and unimportant now. The only thing that mattered was the quiet room in the 5-story panel building and the three people who, without even realizing it, occupied all his thoughts. The office was empty, but his head was full. 3 days, 72 hours. That's how long Min-ho lasted, showing no signs of life. His personal phone lay on his office desk like an unexploded shell, silent and frightening. He'd pick it up, turn on the screen, open an empty chat, but his fingers would hover over the keyboard. What to write? "How are you?" sounded banal and formal. Need any help? Could intimidate, create pressure. He was a master of complex negotiations, but this simple dialogue felt like an impassable minefield. On the 4th day, early in the morning, before starting work, he picked up the phone again. The sun was just rising over the city, tinting the skyscrapers pink. His office was silent. He imagined Shanice already up in that small apartment, feeding the children, beginning her eternal marathon. He typed out a short message, not a question, not a suggestion, just a fact that was bothering him. Did Ali and Amir like the new purees? He sent it and immediately placed the phone face down, as if it might explode. He stood up and walked to the window, trying to distract himself with the view of the waking city, but his attention was completely focused on the silent device on the table. 20 minutes passed. Then, finally, a soft vibration. He almost rushed to the table. Ali ate the whole jar. Amir winced a little, but ate it too. "Thank you." A simple answer. Nothing extra. But Min-ho felt something loosen inside him. He immediately responded, faster, more confidently. "Okay, have you ever gone for a walk in your new overalls? Aren't they too hot?" This time the answer came faster. "We went out. Very comfortable and beautiful. Thank you again. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Those two words had a better effect on him than any profit report. He nodded to himself, as if he'd received a vital message, and was finally able to sit down to his work documents. The bridge had been built. The connection had been established. 2 days later, Minho's patience ran out. There were few messages, only short answers to his direct questions about the children's health. This wasn't enough for him, much less. He craved that feeling again. Silence, warmth, simple presence. He didn't bother to warn her. In the middle of the day, after canceling an appointment, he gave Jin the address. He, without the slightest surprise, merely nodded. On the way, Minho made the driver stop at a large supermarket. He got out alone and returned 20 minutes later, carrying several heavy bags. They contained fresh fruit that could be pureed, high-quality baby cookies, juices, and simple foods for Shanice: chicken, rice, vegetables, and good tea, and 2 new toys, an activity mat, and a large, soft pyramid. When the car stopped at a familiar house, Minho felt a slight, uncharacteristic tension. What if she wasn't home? What if she didn't want to see him? He climbed the stairs and knocked. Quick footsteps and Amir's voice came from behind the door. The door opened. Shani stood there in simple house clothes, with Amir on her hip. When she saw him, she froze, her eyes wide. "Minho, what are you?" "Hello," he said, lightly lifting the heavy bags. "I was just nearby. I decided to pick up some fresh stuff for the kids. And for you." He entered without waiting for an invitation, but his movements were not insistent, but rather businesslike, like a courier fulfilling an important order. He carried the bags into the kitchen and silently began laying out the groceries on the table. Shanice watched, speechless. She saw those bags full of expensive, useful things. She saw this powerful, unfamiliar man standing in the center of her tiny kitchen, gravely checking the expiration date on a jar of pear puree. Ali, seeing him, began to coo joyfully in her crib. Minho turned around. His face softened. He walked over and picked the girl up. She immediately clung to his fingers. "They've grown a lot in the last few days," he remarked, turning to Shanice. "Just a few days. And you can already see it." And so he stayed, all day. He played with the children on the floor, while Shanice prepared lunch from the groceries they'd brought. He spoon-fed Amir, marveling at the way he winced at the broccoli. He sat on the floor again in the evening, helping them put to bed. He was a quiet but constant presence, filling the entire apartment. And Shanice, to her surprise, felt no anxiety, only a strange growing calm. The children were finally asleep. The light was on in the kitchen. The curtains were drawn. They were drinking tea, the same one he had brought. The silence was warm and thick. Minho looked at his tea, then looked up at Shanice. She looked tired, but not as exhausted as when they first met. There was peace on her face, a peace he knew was worth more than anything else, and he was part of the reason for that peace today. He took a sip and set the cup down on the table. The sound was clear in the silence. "Shanice," he said her name for the first time all day. It sounded a little unfamiliar on his tongue, but firm. "I want to offer you something. Something important." She became wary and put down her cup. "What's wrong? If this is about money or other gifts, I can't." "No," he interrupted her gently but firmly. "This isn't about gifts. This is about the future. Yours, and Ali's, and Amir's." He paused, collecting his thoughts, choosing simple, clear words. "Your life here is very hard. You're alone. You have no help. The apartment is cramped, the elevator doesn't work, and moving strollers is a pain. The children are growing. They need space, safety, and fresh air." Shanice listened without moving. "I have a big house, empty. It has lots of rooms, a garden, and a fenced area. There's space for strollers, toys, everything. It's quiet and safe." He looked her straight in the eyes. "Move in with me, all 3 of us, tomorrow, the day after, whenever it's convenient." Shanice froze, as if she'd been doused with ice water. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. "I will provide for you," he continued, his voice low and even, emotionless, which made his words even more weighty. "You won't have to work, ever. Your job is Ali and Amir, to take care of them, to raise them, to be a happy mother. And I," for the first time he hesitated, searching for the right word, "I will provide, protect, and be there. We will be family." He uttered these last words not as a romantic proposal, but as a statement of fact, as the most logical and correct solution to a complex life problem. He was proposing not a marriage for love, but an alliance, a pact. Her motherhood, the warmth, the light of her children, in exchange for his strength, resources, and devotion. He was offering to be everything to them, and for himself, to finally find what he so sorely lacked. The word family hung in the kitchen air, heavy and unbelievable. Shanice recoiled, as if he'd handed her not a cup of tea, but hot metal. Her face paled, her eyes wide, filled with pure, silent shock. She remained silent for so long that Min-ho began to wonder if some invisible thread had snapped between them. You're asking us to move in with you, she finally whispered, and it didn't sound like a question, but like an attempt to wrap her head around a crazy idea. To live together, as a family. Yes, he confirmed simply. It will solve all the problems. Yours and... He didn't finish, but she understood. And his, too. That void he so clearly tried to fill with their presence. Shanice stood up. Her movements were stiff, mechanical. She walked to the faucet, poured herself a glass of water, and drank it down in one gulp, as if trying to quench the fire within. This is impossible, she breathed, staring into the empty glass. This is insane. We barely know each other. You know I won't harm you or the children, he said quietly. You held my passport in your hands. You saw how I treat them. You know that. She knew. That was the horror. She knew that this man, however strange he might be, posed no threat. On the contrary, he was like a rock, and therein lay a temptation so immense it took her breath away. I need to think, she said, her voice shaking. This is too serious. I can't decide just like that right away. Min-ho nodded slowly. He hadn't expected immediate agreement. Of course. Think about it. As long as you need. He stood up. I'll leave. I won't rush you, but my proposal is serious. I await your answer. He left, leaving her alone in the silence of the kitchen, with 2 sleeping children, and thoughts rushing through her head like a hurricane. The next morning, after putting the kids to bed for nap time, Shanice dialed her only close friend, Linda. Linda listened without interrupting, as Shanice rambled, rambling, about the strange man at the mall, the mountains of gifts, the quiet evening in the kitchen, and the crazy proposal. He's Mafia, Shanice, Linda exclaimed into the phone. You know that? He's real, tough. It's dangerous, Shanice said quietly, but confidently, and it sounded like a revelation to her. I've seen him with the children, Lynn. I've never seen anything like him. He looks at them like they're a miracle. And the house. He says there's a garden, a place. And the price, Shanice? Linda asked more gently. Nothing comes for free. What will he want in return? That was the main question. Shanice thought about it. He says, being a family, taking care of the kids, being a wife, I guess, not working. Are you ready for this? For life with such a person? In his world? Shanice looked at the sleeping Amir, at the modest, sparse room. She thought of the endless fatigue, the dread of the end of the month, how Allie had recently caught a cold and she couldn't afford a good doctor. She thought of his large, careful hands holding the bottle, of the silence that came when he was near. I don't know if I'm ready for his world, she answered honestly, but I definitely can't stand another year in mine. Her reply came 2 days later, a short message. We agree, but with one condition. I need to have my own room. And if something goes wrong, we'll leave. Min-ho replied with one word. Accepted. The move took just 1 day. Min-ho had people who did everything quickly and discreetly. They took only the most personal belongings, photographs, and favorite childhood toys from the old apartment. Everything else, he says, was already there. The car pulled into a quiet, gated community outside of town. The house wasn't flashy, but huge and understated, made of stone and glass, surrounded by a high fence and a garden. When Shanice stepped inside, her breath caught, not from the luxury, but from the space, from the silence, from the light pouring through the huge windows into the living room, which overlooked the green garden. Min-ho silently led her upstairs. He opened the door to a spacious, bright room with a large bed and its own bathroom. Yours. The nursery is right here. Next door. The next door led to a room that brought tears to Shanice's eyes. It was decorated in soft pastel colors. It contained 2 beautiful wooden cribs, a chest of drawers, a changing table, and shelves for toys. A soft, warm carpet lay on the floor. Everything was ready, perfect, safe, beautiful. They'll sleep and play here, Min-ho said, watching her reaction, and they'll go for walks in the garden. It's clean and safe there, and you don't have to watch them every second. He showed her the kitchen, the dining room, the guest room, and his office. Everything was thoughtfully designed, high quality, but without ostentatious luxury. This was a home for living, a fortress. When the children, exhausted from the journey, finally fell asleep in their new cribs, Shanice stood in the middle of the living room, feeling both shocked and strangely at home. The place already exuded peace and security. Shanice woke to an unusual silence, not from a baby's crying, but from the birds singing outside the window. She lay there for a few seconds, unsure of where she was. Then she remembered. A soft mattress, a high ceiling, light filtering through expensive curtains. She stood up and walked barefoot out of her room. The door to the nursery was ajar. The cribs were empty. For a moment, she panicked. But then she heard sounds, not crying, but laughter. A child's laughter, and the low, quiet voice of Min-ho. She walked downstairs, through the living room to the open glass doors into the garden. Ho sat on a large, bright blanket on the soft grass. He was wearing simple dark pants and a white t-shirt, without his usual expensive jacket. Ali and Amir were crawling around him. Amir was trying to reach the ball, and Ali was clapping her hands excitedly on the grass. Minho was saying something to them in a quiet, even voice, helping Amir roll the ball. Then he looked up and saw Shanice in the doorway. He didn't smile broadly, but his gaze, usually so distant, became soft and somehow full. "Good morning," he said. They woke up early. "I didn't want to wake you." She stepped out into the garden. The grass was cool and damp under her feet. She sat down on the edge of the blanket. Ali immediately crawled over to her and grabbed hold of her robe. Shanice looked at this picture, her happy, pure children in a safe green garden, this incredible man who looked at them as if they were his most precious treasure. She suddenly realized the impossibility and the simplicity of what had happened. Her life, so hard and gray, was suddenly and irrevocably upended. She no longer had to struggle for survival alone. She no longer had to fear tomorrow. She breathed in the fresh morning air, heard Amir's laughter, and a silence devoid of anxiety. She looked at Minho, and his gaze met hers. No words were needed. She understood. Life had changed forever, and this change was not an end, but a beginning. The beginning of something new, unknown, but strong and bright, like this morning in the garden.